Welcome to TVW Connects. I'm David Johnson, TVW's Director of Education. Today we're connecting with Washington Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Reykdal. He will be answering questions from parents and educators about reopening Washington schools in the fall. Superintendent Reykdal, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you.
So I want to start with a question. Do you feel it's important for students to physically return to schools in the fall? And if so, why?
Yeah, to the best extent possible within health and safety guidelines. We've built an entire system around great learning, but also the social emotional needs of kids, nursing supports, mental health supports. We know that school has been designed for decades in this country and in our state to be comprehensive centers for success. So there are kids who really lost out on a lot of that. So our preference is that we get back face-to-face, and by that I mean with lots of health protections. It may not be the case everywhere. There may be counties that can't get there. There may be space configurations that won't allow it due to social distancing mandates. And school districts are working through how much they can bring back in a way that is safe and healthy. And then what can they do at a distance for some students who can't come back, or maybe whose families choose not to come back.
All right, thanks. So we have a lot of questions about reopening Washington schools. So let's go to the first one.
My name is Liz Murdock. I am a high school teacher in Seattle. Despite the difficulties and tragedies of the COVID-19 crisis, there's real opportunities to reimagine and reinvigorate learning in ways that could benefit all students, especially those students furthest from educational justice. The reopening work group stops short of examining this. Are there plans in the future for the work group to expand its scope and continue to look at these opportunities?
Yeah, it's a awesomely powerful question. This group definitely put its attention in the first phase of this on the mechanics of reopening. So expertise in nutrition, busing systems, obviously budgets to make sure we can afford it. How do we do the professional development? How do we physically distance? So very mechanical steps in the beginning to get districts underway, but then groups continue to meet about that larger transformation. And we've been pushing that, right, with a reimagination of our grading system that's less punitive, that focuses on student success, that focuses on learning standards. Those are the kinds of transformations that have been going on, and we're going to continue to expedite those. This first phase was very much about the mechanics of getting schools physically capable of receiving as many students as they can in a safe and healthy way.
Will the work group continue its work and look at possible ways to reimagine schools?
Yeah, and this is ongoing work for us. So probably not in a 120-person work group at a distance, right? That needed a lot of voices for some of the health information that came their way, some of the looks at other nations and other states. We wanted their reaction to that and really diverse feedback about all of that. It's in smaller subgroups now. We'll continue to dive into these subjects in deeper ways over the summer in smaller groups. But then there's ongoing work here. So we have advisory groups here at OSPI around students with disabilities and migrant and bilingual students and Native American students. So we have these groups that are pretty transformative, and they push policy our direction that we can advance to the legislature and education. Those will continue, but then we'll continue to have these subgroups that have stemmed out of this as well. People wanted change fast, and our first step was the safety aspects, and then we'll continue to make progress on these other issues, either ad hoc or in these formal organizations. And we are meeting with groups at a distance all over the state right now, from Spokane to Seattle to Bellingham to Clark County, listening about their interests. The other thing I'll add is all of this, of course, is only ever a policy framework from Olympia. We've structured an entire legal system around local school boards who have virtually all of these decisions at their discretion. So as folks advocate statewide, they really need to be advocating locally as well.
All right, thank you. Let's go to another question.
Hi, my name is Niki Jones from Pullman, Washington, and my question today is why Washington schools continue to keep and pay for school resource officers when numerous studies have found that they are ineffective during school shooting incidents, and they do create a hostile and intimidating learning environment for children of color and their families also.
Yeah, this is a really emerging question that's been clearly elevated in the current environment as police reforms move through nationally and at state levels. In our state, that question of resource officers is a local decision. There's nothing in our prototypical school model, so how we fund schools doesn't identify them. This is not a mandate of the state by any means at all. Local school districts have decided or not decided to have officers. They decide or not decide whether they are armed. I have a personal opinion about this. I do not believe it is necessary to have armed officers in our schools. I think on balance, based on the research, that it is damaging and harmful. And so now the question is, are legislators going to step into this local control environment and make a bigger proclamation by statute to prohibit that or to put restrictions on it? We have advanced additional training for existing officers in our schools, again, whether they're uniformed or not, armed or not. But I personally don't think that goes far enough. I'd like to see all weapons removed from our schools. But ultimately, that's a local decision right now, and the legislature would have to make some statutory changes to prohibit or ban that practice at this point in time. If the issue comes up, I will be advocating to remove any armed personnel in our schools.
All right, thanks. Let's go on to our next question.
Hi, my name is Sarah Mcllwain. I live in Lake Forest Park, and I'm curious to know how the school districts will accommodate the appropriate social distancing of 6 feet when kids return to school, given that classrooms and hallways are already overflowing with kids.
We've been working with our partners at Department of Health and Labor and Industries and the governor's office, and the 6-foot rule is really a planning framework. So we do need our classrooms to be reconfigured under the current Department of Health rules, and students need to be 6 feet apart when they're seated. So when direct instruction is happening, that framework needs to be in place. But they've also recognized a real need for flexibility. There will be times when students get up and they walk past their classmates to sharpen a pencil or to work one-on-one with a teacher. A teacher's still moving and interacting throughout that classroom. So the 6-foot rule is not an absolute all the time must have. It's the planning framework. It's the spacing requirements in classroom configurations. But the passing time in the hallways, that's part of it. Department of Health takes a multi-layered approach to this. So what makes that possible, and the reason why it is okay at times to violate that, is because we're wearing face coverings, and we have a hand washing routine, and we're cleaning our buildings more frequently. This entire culture of safety and health layers on each other. It's not one issue in isolation or one tactic in isolation. They have to work together. I know it's frustrating for people to think about masks, but the rest of the world is doing this. It tends to be very much an adult concern based on liberties and ideological belief. But our observation in looking at 12 or 13 other countries is young people don't have an issue with this. They do a really good job, but the rules are also allowing some flexibility around the 6 feet. But we got to wear face coverings and have some fidelity about that. That's the kind of multi-tiered strategy that makes it a safe environment to be in.
All right, let's go to our next question.
Hi, my name is Nora Donnelly. I live in Bellingham, and I'm a pediatric physical therapy assistant in Skagit County. And in regard to schools opening in the fall of this year, my questions or concerns are in regards to disinfecting and sanitizing. I'm very curious as to how schools are going to be able to keep up with the state's new requirements for sanitizing and disinfecting. I'm wondering how often these procedures will be happening throughout the day, and also who's going to be responsible for implementing and actually doing the cleaning and sanitizing. Thanks.
So cleaning and sanitizing is one of those multi-layers that Department of Health mandates. Labor and Industries also has some elements of this. Again, this is their regulation. They point to CDC guidance in this case, and there's a regiment to that. There's a cycle to that. That is respective of regular cleaning, a more intensive effort in schools, and then strategies, candidly, in teacher practices. So PE teachers this year will be tasked with the sort of unique concept of cohorting as much as possible. Students are in groups, and so that group is sharing a basketball or a soccer ball, for example, but you're minimizing the contact with that. It has to be clean between each usage, so each class period. Same thing with playground equipment. It's not a prohibition, but there needs to be periodic cleaning throughout the day for that. That is identified in CDC guidance, and our districts are pretty used to this. there's clearly an additional layer to this now, but they've got staff on board who do this. It is essential that we get our federal emergency dollars. This is how a lot of districts intend to pay for that effort from a labor cost standpoint. So far, we've gotten 80% of that money, a green light from OFM, the Office of Financial Management, to release to our districts. But the rest isn't anticipated to come until August. And so we need all that federal aid and probably more to pay the costs of additional cleaning and all the safety components of this. But very clear protocols, and our districts, I think, are going to do a really good job with those.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Brown. I'm a high school teacher in Tacoma, Washington. My question stems from being both a teacher and a parent. So working around a lot of immunocompromised teachers, students, and then having my own small children at home, I'm wondering what the state is planning to do to protect teachers. So if we have teachers that aren't ready to go back to school, if they don't feel safe, going back in the fall, what's the plan with them? Or if my children get sick and I can't go to work for a week, how am I protected? And what's the plan then in that scenario?
Great. The labor and industries folks in our state control this. They have that health and safety regulation over employees, our workers, and the folks who deliver services in our schools. They have pretty stringent framework in place. It's consistent across sectors. And so that multi-layered safety approach districts have to follow. If there are at-risk employees, and there's a definition to that, over 65, immunocompromised, other health conditions, they can ask for additional PPE or protections or accommodations in some form. If that still can't be agreed to or achieved, they can ask for alternative work assignments, and the employer has a responsibility to navigate that with them. If that still can't happen due to budget or say a narrow scope of the work that they do, then the employee has access to leave, and there's additional leave that's been granted via the feds and through our Employment Security Department in the state of Washington. So there's a multi-layered approach here to protect staff and safety. It really begins with the same things we're all going to do: cleaning, hand hygiene, masks, social distancing, but there are added protections for employees who need them, and there's a very strict protocol that districts need to follow with those employees to make those opportunities available.
All right, let's go to the next one.
Hey, Stacy, and I work in the Ellensburg School District as a parapro. I work with Title I children, and I would like to know how their needs get met, and will PPEs be provided for those children during this time?
Yeah, so PPE in our laws in the state of Washington, when it's required of employees, the workers, the school districts will be providing that for every employee. It's an option for families, really, on the child. A lot of families are going to choose to have their own mask and to have their own approach to this, which they certainly can. We will have resources, though, in our buildings, in our classrooms, for any student who comes to school and doesn't have a mask, let's say, or doesn't have maybe any of the other requirements of them. But that hand sanitizer, the cleaning, the soap products, all of that, the schools will be providing. The mask can be a family choice. That's why they're recommending cloth, because you can wash them frequently. It's a very different world, and we've had parts of the planet exposed to this for years in various forms, and it's a different way of having to behave and operate until there's a really high quality vaccine with a high uptake. But these are some of the things we have to do, and the school districts will be providing all of that for their staff, the basic cleaning and basic hand hygiene components for students. And then families get choice on how they want to deal with the face coverings, but we will have backup masks there for any student who shows up with that one.
All right, we have a question about testing, so let's go to the next question.
My name is Rich Quadrel, and I'm the owner of Sage College Prep Services here in Richland, Washington. I'd like to know if the high schools will be permitted to administer the SAT and the ACT tests this fall. The College Board and the ACT organization have scheduled these standardized tests, but students may not be able to take them if the testing locations are not permitted to host such a large assembly of students. Given that different counties are in different phases of reopening, it's possible that high schools in some counties may be able to administer the tests, while high schools in other counties may not. So the question is, will students be able to take the SAT this fall? And if so, at which high schools?
Yeah, thank you. We've tried to create an environment here where our opening for our schools is not a function of phases. We know it's the highest and paramount duty of the state and our Constitution to have public schools available to students. Again, the governor was really insistent that there be an equitable opportunity. He is suggesting, however, that in phase one counties, there may be additional protections required or additional restrictions. But the goal here is that every school will have the opportunity within the health constraints to open. That means when they do that, they're open. And if they still have relationships with SAT and ACT and their testing location centers, we would expect those to be permitted opportunities. So we expect those to move forward. I will say that universities are walking away from SAT, ACT very rapidly in this country. And they are looking at multiple measure systems, and I'm really proud of the work that they've done. So I suspect there's going to be fewer opportunities in the future on these tests because there's fewer students who will need them for admissions. But if we are open and functioning successfully as we hope we will be, those kinds of opportunities will be available in the schools if they're testing centers.
In your recent press conference, you mentioned Learning 2.0. Can you tell us what Learning 2.0 is?
Yeah, continuous learning 2.0. So again, our goal here is to get our students in our schools safely and in full health. We know that there may be counties that's going to be harder to do. There may be building configurations where they can't accommodate all their students. There may be families that want an option to be at home learning. We shut down so rapidly in March, as did the rest of the country. Every state shut down. 53 million kids were not in school, that there wasn't time to do the professional development for teachers in online learning. And we do have a couple of preferred learning management systems. So the way we interact with kids, the way assignments are delivered, or the way homework comes back in, there are platforms for this, and we have them, and they're very successful. We've just never put an attention around narrowing those options. So continuous learning 2.0 is to challenge districts to have a backup plan, even if they intend to come back face-to-face, to have a plan for it, to have the PD, the professional development in place, to have those platforms understood by families, and then have schedules that make more sense, right? This shut down so rapidly that in some communities they were up and running the next day, and in other places they're so rural or so remote, or left it up to local buildings, that it was a disparate opportunity. Our suggestion and guidance to districts is your district needs a schedule for that. If you have to go to continuous learning or online learning, build a framework for it so that families understand when their students can expect engagement from teachers, how many instructional hours a day, how much of that learning is expected to be independent learning, what's the frequency of those relationships with their teacher or counselor online. Again, that is not our preferred model. I just keep saying that. People know that this is an opportunity. Some students thrive in those models. Higher ed has a better opportunity, but online learning should not be our default game plan. It's the backup when we can't do it successfully in our schools, but it's not our default. However, should we have to go there, our districts will be far better prepared with better schedules, better structures, and better communication with families. That's the guidance to districts on continuous learning 2.0.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to the next question.
Hello, my name is Diane Graham, and I live in Brier, Washington. I'm a former music teacher for the Edmonds School District, and my question is this. Because I believe that the arts are crucial to any child's education, I'm wondering how, if children are together again in the fall or soon thereafter, how will children meet any kind of music standards, especially singing, since I know that aspiration is an issue? How will they be able to meet the standards for that requirement? And how will teachers be able to allow children to sing in this situation? Thanks for your time.
Well, Diane asked a really powerful question that I know Department of Health is struggling with. Remember, our distancing guidelines and our mask guidelines and all of that come from Department of Health, and they've specifically struggled with choir, a little bit with band, of course, but with choir, obviously you need that sound quality, and the face covering becomes a challenge. Again, with the multiple mitigation strategies, it means distance, right? You can mitigate for a lot of that with a lot more distance. It's strange to have a choir when kids are 14 or 15 feet apart from each other. It can be done. So they have not prohibited choir. It is an essential learning component for the kids who engage in it. It's basic ed. People need to stop thinking about the arts as an extra. It is core to our learning. It is core to basic education credits and the earned credits to graduate, for example. But they're struggling a little bit with how to guide districts. At this point, they've said you need to add additional distancing mitigation strategies. But we might see them give us additional guidance on choir band specific. Tough to schedule. It's probably not going to work in most of the places where those classes have been occurring due to the distance. Might need to use gymnasiums or larger facilities to accommodate that opportunity for kids. But we are trying to create that opportunity. Right now, districts are being super creative in their thinking. We've challenged DOH to come up with a little more concrete guidance around choir in particular.
All right, thanks. Let's go on to the next question.
Kim Depew here, longtime resident of West Seattle. Hi, everybody, and I have a question for Superintendent Reykdal. Several of us are concerned about how students are going to be able to get to school. In particular, how are we going to maintain social distancing when students are riding yellow buses or using their ORCA cards to use the metro?
So busing has been another challenge for, I think, the State Department of Health. And here's what they recognize. As a basic education right for our students, they also have a right to get to school. So you're going to see school districts build strategies that encourage parents and families to stay together as much as possible. So they're going to encourage more drop-offs and pickups. They're going to perhaps reconsider their boundary lines for pickups. Many districts have a half-mile radius where families need to drop off or kids need to walk or bike to school. They could mess with those lines and move those lines around at a local determination to try to limit numbers. But there isn't a specific prohibition to busing. And again, it's this multi-layered strategy. What makes possible the ability to transport kids is that generally these are shorter in duration trips. And even when they're more rural and remote, we have an out and back strategy in districts. They go out and pick up the most remote kids. They're very isolated on the bus. You create a social distancing pattern on that bus, and it might be in the last mile or 2 miles, the last 15 or 5 minutes or 10 minutes where students are within the 6 feet. But the mitigating strategies, of course, are that we're wearing face coverings and the hand hygiene and the screening that occurs, the cleaning regimen, the protection for the driver. All of these things interact with each other, and it's why we say the planning framework is 6 feet, certainly in our buildings, but health has been really responsive to try to meet the needs of families getting to school, to get their basic education rights met, knowing that 6 feet may not be possible everywhere. They've said these are the mitigating strategies that make a break in that rule, if you will, for a short duration possible. So we expect to transport our kids this year. I can't speak to the ORCA card because that's a local school district relationship they have with a local transit authority. But I know those transit facilities are also working on their own distancing policies with their local county boards of health. But we expect to transport kids, but there'll be a lot of mitigating strategies when they're on the bus, and then there'll be a lot of work by districts to try to get fewer kids on buses. But this is some of that really huge work that caused us to go as quickly as we could here in June. So districts have really 2 months to put their full plans in place for the fall.
All right, thanks. We have a lot of questions about virtual learning. So let's go to the next question.
Hi, my name is Brian. I'm from Bothell. My question is, how will virtual learning work this fall?
Pretty straightforward question from Brian. Well, as we've indicated, the goal here is to try to safely bring kids back to school and staff, but the health protocols have to be in place. So if some form of distance learning or online learning needs to continue because it's a hybrid model, or maybe districts are going to focus on their kindergarten through 8th graders in person and challenge more of their high school students to take classes virtually, whatever their configuration is, districts need to have a plan to do it, and all districts need to have a plan to switch to it in case they open and there's a potential outbreak and they have to close again. So better professional development, a narrowing of the learning management system, so students and families are really only navigating one system or maybe two, depending on if they have a elementary kid and a high school kid. And then obviously building really routine schedules. We learned a lot this spring from districts that were really good at this work. And we built example models for all the districts around how you build a schedule around continuous learning or distance remote learning. And that's part of the district planning effort right now. So if anybody watching today has questions about how their district is doing this, I really encourage you to get a hold of the district office and their superintendent. They're working through these questions right now, and they're building their plan for the fall right now. So they've got a guidance and a framework from the state. We give them educational guidance. Department of Health and L&I gives them health mandates they must follow. And then this all comes together with a local school board adoption of the reopening plans.
All right, thanks. Let's move on to the next question.
By advocating and suggesting that many districts move towards a hybrid model, that would double the amount of preps currently on teachers' plates. What's being done to address that inequity? I understand that a lot is trying to be done to address the technology inequity. A lot is being done to address the class sizes being a health concern. But what is being done to address the inequitable workload that we see for teachers having to both prepare for online instruction and support students effectively through online instruction, while at the same time maintaining that relationship-based classroom presence?
Great. Thank you, Julie. Districts are working through this right now with their local education associations, right? So there's a lot of concern about whatever model is developed locally and adopted locally really needs to recognize that student equity is first and foremost, the opportunity to learn, to be connected, to have success and supports. And then our teachers do too, our educators do too, whether they're certificated or paraeducators. That's that delicate thing that happens at the local level. What I observe from most districts is they're rarely going to have teachers in both a face-to-face and an online if it means duplication of student loads. It's going to be the same cohort of students. Or we observe that there's going to be grade bands where they really want students full-time back in school and maybe even using additional facilities to accommodate the spacing, but then have entire grade bands, perhaps high school, being online, so the teacher doesn't double workload or have more preps. They're just delivering their particular grade level at a distance. All of these are going to be district decisions. We've given them the boundaries. We've got a new analogy here, which is we're trying to build the outside of a puzzle for them, so at least they know the size of the puzzle and the shape, and the districts are filling in all the individual pieces to the inside to complete their version of success this fall.
Mcllwain, Spokane, Washington, teacher. I also wanted to ask how we are planning on funding any additional learning hours and teaching hours that would go into a hybrid type model for the fall.
Yeah, there's a couple parts to this that are really important. The governor has gotten rid of, sort of suspended his school closure proclamation. He's reissued a new one as of last Thursday that's allowing our buildings to already begin to open services for the fall. So you see students who did not have a very good experience in many districts getting a one-to-one connection now in terms of bringing them in, catching them up in supports. Maybe it's students with disabilities, speech therapy, perhaps it's English language learners. So some of that work is happening this fall already. There are certainly districts that are going to have what they call jumpstart programs where they want to bring kids in early this year and really give them an intensive catch-up. We're hearing a lot of that in math in particular. They want to really do intensive math work as a review for kids and minimize the summer learning loss that typically happens. And then if we go into the fall, you're seeing some districts make decisions to say, if we can't accommodate every kid face-to-face with all the health restrictions, then let's prioritize the students who need the most support in a face-to-face environment. So try to avoid the student who needs therapies or the student who needs intensive supports. Bring those in face-to-face and try to identify cohorts of students who will have more success in distance learning. The goal here isn't to try to do all things for all students in both modalities, but it's to really find what is most successful for students and their families and accommodate that. We still believe that with the proper health framework in place, most of that can return to our buildings in a safe way, but where it can't, districts are making really critical local decisions on prioritizing face-to-face for some students.
Hi, my name is Trevor White and I'm from Snohomish. What if students don't have adequate internet access at home?
Yeah, thank you, Trevor. Again, this is some of what the districts are doing. They've been inventorying their families for connectivity. They've been providing devices in some cases, Wi-Fi hotspots, or even broadband connections. We've been trying to use some federal dollars here that we have at the state. It's not a lot, but our goal was to purchase connectivity for some students who are free and reduced price lunch. They're in a serviceable area, but they don't have the resources to make the connection. Our goal was to use some of our federal emergency funds to do that. Candidly, the Office of Financial Management hasn't released those dollars for us yet to do that, but those are the strategies that are occurring. Statewide strategies for connectivity and local districts providing the opportunity. But again, they're also going to prioritize. I think you can expect districts to have a better inventory, and where they can accommodate students face-to-face, they're going to want to bring students in who didn't have success, couldn't connect, or maybe don't have the resources, or they do, but they're so rural and remote that the connectivity is just not functional for what we call synchronous online learning. Those are those local decisions districts are making right now. And I'd encourage you to just stay focused on your local school district to say, what is the plan here for those students who aren't connected or who can be connected, but it's just not very functional? Will they get sort of a unique opportunity to come to school if there's capacity?
Okay, thanks. Let's go to another question.
I'm Greg Feise from Seattle, and I'm wondering what the plan will be if staff and students come up positive in the fall. Will the schools have to be closed down for 2 weeks, or how is this going to be addressed? Thank you.
Yeah, it's an awesome question. So our State Department of Health has been working on much better protocols. They've learned a lot about the virus itself. Obviously, they've got incredible models now that were, sort of rudimentary in the beginning when they didn't know much, and it's gotten more sophisticated. So they've got a cleaning regimen and a closure regimen that makes more sense. They're working with their local county health organizations. They will be the ones responsible for making the ultimate determination to close a building. I don't think you should expect school districts to close as a whole unless the entire county is experiencing something significant. But a building may have to. Those county health officials have been training folks in contact tracing. So immediately there'll be protocols on really identifying what the spread may have been. The building will go through a cleaning protocol again. And because of all those other multiple layers we've discussed, the hand hygiene, the mask protections, the social distancing, the screening process, I think our health officials feel confident that they can get schools reopened again where they have to close them on a short-term basis. It'll be much more effective than in the beginning when there was so much that was unknown, but ultimately local county health organizations will make that determination about the process, and they'll do the contact tracing. That's not a role that school districts know how to do or challenged to do.
Where's a good place that folks can go to get really clear information about reopening schools?
Yeah, OSPI's website, and you put that in any search, OSPI, it'll come to us, and it's .edu. And the cool part is we have a COVID-19 page, and every bit of guidance that we've created for our school districts going back to March is on that, including the recent reopening guidance. As we issue that, we translate that into Spanish. That is our second most dominant language in the state. We are trying again to use some federal dollars to partner with local organizations to get it translated into more languages along the way here. We need those funds released by OFM and the legislature. But that's a great place for them to go. That'll give them statewide guidance, give them a preliminary sense of what's possible here. And it's really their local school district who's in the planning process right now to know exactly how their school district will run. What is their bell schedule going to be? What are their connections going to look like? What are their busing routes going to look like? All of that is at the local level.
All right, thanks. We're almost out of time for this Connect session, but is there anything you would like to add that we haven't talked about so far?
Well, I just want to add a huge thank you to the people of Washington State. This has been hard, and it's been in the midst of a remarkable time of civil conflict in our nation. I sort of believe we're in a culture war right now on a lot of fronts. And to be, sort of candid about it, it hits our schools. So whether it's policies that don't advance racial equity and success, or quite frankly, economic policies that don't allow rural communities to connect to broadband, for example, or it's communities with ideological beliefs that kids shouldn't be required to wear face masks, we sort of get hit with a lot of these larger sort of national cultural challenges in our schools. And I really encourage folks to, lead with what we've been talking about in education, which is grace. It is as unknown for teachers and principals and superintendents as it is for families, and they are putting their best foot forward. This entire push to try to get our kids back in our schools is not taken lightly. We are really focusing on health and safety, but it is on balance the best place for kids to learn and to be successful, and that's what we want to do. But everyone needs to play their part. There's people who want to argue competing science around masks, but at this point, we listen to Department of Health. That's our regulator. We're not experts in it. And they're telling us, for example, that face coverings and social distancing and hand hygiene are just enormous together in creating protection. And we're seeing states around the country where they're not doing that, and now their cases are really blowing up. So my last message is we own our own fate. The better we do this summer in our protections for ourselves, in our communities, and the way we interact, creates the opportunity to continue to get back to school and to help our economy recover. But we all have to own some of this, and maybe check some of our personal beliefs we've historically had, and focus a little bit on us. It's more about us than I right now. And wearing a mask is about other people. It doesn't keep you from getting anything. It keeps you, in case you're symptomatic, from spreading it to others. And we all have to step up and do our part.
All right. Well, thank you, Superintendent Reykdal. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's good to see you all.
So that's all the time we have for this TVW Connect session. I want to thank our guest, Washington Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Reykdal. I'm David Johnson. Thank you for watching.